Okay, guys, it's time. Woo! It's time. I just met Joe tonight, but I've talked to him on the phone, and my good friend Lynn I said, I'm looking for a speaker again, and she says, oh, do I have somebody for you? And I called her, I said, he's not answering me. And she said, give me a minute. And like 2 seconds later, I'm in touch with him. I love you, Lynn. Anyway, so Joe, I talked to him and everything, and I'm going, oh, he is the speaker for us. Yeah. So I'm just going to keep it real short. He's a filmmaker. He did Unplanned, which is about a Planned Parenthood person that switched and became pro-life. He also did, with one of my favorite heartthrob actors, Dennis Quaid, he did I Can Only Imagine, the movie about the song. Yeah. And so, Joe, without further ado,
all right. Well, thanks for letting me be here. What Lori did not say is, I always have to ask, how much time do I have? Because trust me, as a filmmaker, that's dangerous. I can't do anything in less than an hour and a half. To which she said, everyone else is going to be on the clock except you, Joe. So I have no idea how long we're going to be here, but we'll do our best here. But I have to start with, I do travel the country a lot. I was in Florida for the past 2 weeks, and I was in West Palm, so I'll tell you about that here in a few minutes. But it's so great to be back in literally the heart of Ohio. When I heard that we're auctioning off pies and guns, and you just know you're back in the heart of Ohio. It just doesn't get any better than that. And then to hear all of the speakers that have come up, sheriff, the representatives, and I have to say, I did have a little distraction in my life. About a year and a half ago, I ran for lieutenant governor with Jim Renacci. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But I had the privilege of being alongside Sharon Kennedy for what felt like every day, 6 months in a row. And it's so great to meet the next Sharon Kennedy. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart, just hearing you speak. Thank you for what you're doing. I know it's not easy. But what I want to do tonight, there's so much I want to talk about, and evidently I had time to, so I'll get over a lot of it. But, we live in a really interesting time. And in my space, as I make these movies, I travel the country, and because a lot of my movies have like a faith side to them, I spend a lot of time in churches. And I have to be careful because I know there's at least one pastor in the house tonight, but some churches aren't standing up for what we believe here in this room today. And that's a problem, and I'm sure we could have long conversations about that, and a lot of people here would agree on that. And at the same time, our Republican Party, I look out across the room here, and it is so great on a Saturday night that everybody is here. But how many people are not here? And my wife's not here. First, she said she's heard me talk a few times before, but she's with our kids doing, I think it was football tonight, it was soccer this morning, but there are so many people that need to be in this room tonight, but they're not here. They don't get to hear everything that we heard tonight articulated so perfectly as it was tonight. So that puts the burden on us, and I'm going to talk about that. I want everyone here in this room tonight, by the time that I'm done speaking in the next hour or so, to really think about 3 things. First is everyone here has a story. One of 8 kids, single mom. Sorry, I'm gonna. I really appreciate what you said tonight, so I might pick on you a few times more tonight. But plus, you just never know when you're gonna need a Supreme Court justice on your side. So. And Sharon Kennedy was so great. My boys are 18 and 16. My daughter's about to be 14, and she was amazing with my boys. So that's why I really have a great appreciation for Sharon Kennedy. And one of them might need that call one day. The middle one, I don't understand. Everyone seems to have that middle child issue, but he's great. But the 3 things I want everyone to know is everyone here has a story. And part of your story is actually why you're here tonight. Something that happened to you in the past, or how you grew up, or something in your journey to get here tonight is why you so strongly believe what us conservatives believe. So I'm going to share my story, and hopefully from that you'll glean and make sure you truly understand your own story. Because I will say, like you were saying earlier, the best way we can educate people about what we believe on, whether it's issue one or anything that we believe in, is just very simply tell our own story. Tell why we believe what we do. And that truly has been proven to have the best opportunity to get someone else to at least think about our side. And I don't mean go on Fox News or Newsmax or whatever we're listening to today and just, fight, with what we believe in, but to truly, listen to someone else, but then also be able to communicate and articulate emotionally why we believe what we believe, because that gives us a chance to convince the other side that maybe they're wrong. And I say that because it works. I'm in the storytelling business. It does work. The second thing that I really want everyone to understand is you all have a platform. Whether you're an elected official, whether you're a mom, a grandmother, a Sunday school teacher, whatever your job is, everybody here has a platform. Understand what your platform is. Understand the opportunities that exist every day to share with those that are not here tonight what your platform is. Use that platform to convey our message to everybody else. And then the third thing is, and this is a little bit harder, and again, I'll share more later why I really believe that everyone needs to have a strategy. So, understand your story, understand your platform, but figure out how you're going to use both of them. Because I promise you, the left has brilliantly gotten together with the whiteboard decades ago, and they figured out how to take over entertainment and media. I know for a fact they've done that. It was written down. A lot of it has been removed from their tech software programs, but they got together and they figured out, in the mid-'80s, they figured out, how do we get this gay and lesbian movement to be accepted in this country? And they got together. It took 2 years for a group of 170 leaders in the weekend of February of 1988 to gather. And they gathered and said, hey, we're different. We don't all agree on this issue alike. However, we're very fragmented. So can we come together and figure out a strategy to have what we do agree on be accepted in this country? And by the time they left on that weekend retreat in a political retreat center in Virginia, it was called the Ari House. That's where they met. They left on Sunday with 2 goals in mind. One was to be portrayed in a nightly sitcom, and it was called Will and Grace. And that brought that character into our houses, and we watched in our living rooms, and we learned and became very empathetic towards this character. And if you go back and study what they did, the first 8 episodes, you didn't really know much about this guy, but they knew that you would like him, and they infiltrated our houses, and before long it was number 1, number 2 rated show in the country. And I hate to say it, but some folks that you go to church with were probably watching that show because it was on TV at night. The second thing they did was got Tom Hanks to play a role in a movie called Philadelphia. He was an attorney passing away of AIDS. And if you go home tonight and hop on YouTube and watch Tom Hanks' Oscar-winning speech for the movie Philadelphia, he knew why he took that role. He was being a champion for that cause. And then fast forward to today, you can't turn the TV on without them being, portrayed, seen. I can literally pitch a movie to NBC Universal, and I know this for a fact, about the 12 disciples. And one of the first questions out of their mouths was, which one is a transgender character? I'm like literally, we've all read the same, but that's where we're at today in entertainment. And that does not occur if they don't get together, put some differences aside, and make a decision that we are going to die on this mountain. So I say that we all have to have we have a story, we have a platform, but we have to know how we're going to use it. And that is inclusive with even our children and grandchildren, our kids' friends. We have to use our platforms. So my journey, and again, we all have a story, so I'll share mine with you. I grew up in Philadelphia, which I'm very proud of because that's also where our country began. And I've had the chance to take my kids to Independence Hall, a bunch of times. They love going there. But I grew up in a rough family situation. I had 2 older sisters. There was a lot of abuse, drugs, alcohol, lots of things that occurred in our house. It was a rough part of the town. And when you say that about Philly, there's even rougher parts of Philly. So Kensington is actually where I grew up. If you hear that in the news these days, it's one of the top 3 drug areas in the country, evidently. But that's where I was born to. By the time I was 5 years old, the police actually came to our house and took my 2 sisters, my mom, and myself away from our dad. And to this day, never saw him again. But that placed us on the streets. So for about 2 years, we all lived on the streets and just survived for food. My kids always laugh when I say we stole for food, but we actually did. In the convenience store, we would steal ketchup and noodles. That became spaghetti for a week. But we survived. My sisters found somehow like 1 block over from where we normally hung out was this little church. And it's called a Bethel Temple. It's still there today. I've been there several times over the past couple of years. And there was a sign out front in this church, and it said, if you come to Sunday school, free Dunkin' Donuts and orange juice. So my sisters figured that out, and we went quite a few weeks in a row, never with our mom. She never came with us. So as a result of that, some folks at the church started noticing, that there was, new street kids, showing up at the church. And this next line always sounds like a TV script or something. But when a guy named Wes Whitehead, he attended this church. He actually lived in the suburbs. He was a very successful architect. But his heart and passion was for just the inner city, Philadelphia. So he attended this church. And he remembered on a cold November night that he was wondering where the whereabouts of these 3 kids that kept showing up at church. And he drove to the church, which is a rough part of town. And he actually walked in and out of the abandoned houses, I guess call them crack houses today, until he found us. And when he showed up at our house, I always get emotional, but he saw us 3 kids, and we were wearing t-shirts, and it was cold outside, and he figured out which lady there was our mom, and got permission from her that night to take us to an orphanage in Philadelphia. So when I was 7 years old at the time, we hopped in the church van with this stranger named Wes Whitehead, and he dropped me off at an orphanage in Philly and took my sisters to a different one about an hour and a half away. And then about a year and a half later, they were able to reunite the 3 of us at one orphanage, and we all stayed there until we graduated from high school. So that's my childhood years. In high school, fortunately, we went to public school and local church. So as normal of a life as that could be, except we lived in the mysterious orphanage on the hill that none of our friends got to come to. But it's funny talking to my friends today. They're like, yeah, we never actually got to go to your house. But in high school, I wanted to go to college, like a lot of my friends were getting ready to go do. I knew I couldn't afford it, and the orphanage didn't really prepare us for college. They prepared us to live on our own. So through high school, I had a job and paid some rent, bought some groceries, just to be able to life skills to be able to live on our own. So not knowing that I couldn't afford college, God had me drive by a Air Force recruiter sign that said, free education, free college if you enlist. Well, I had no idea what enlistment really meant. I knew nobody that was in the military. But I pulled in and literally signed up that day to take all my testing for the Air Force. And I signed up to be an X-ray tech in the Air Force for 6 years. So I spent about 6 months of training down in Texas at 2 different bases there. And then I might have been 19 by the time I got stationed at a place called Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. So that was crazy. I'm 49, so that was 30 years ago. But I spent the rest of my 6-year enlistment, so about 5.5 years, I was at Wright-Pat. And I was a surgical X-ray tech. And I always feel bad for my kids when they have to explain what their dad does, because I've had multiple weird jobs that aren't at all related. But when I was in the Air Force, I was an X-ray tech. And I went to night school at Wright State to get a finance degree. More importantly, I met my wife. You don't get paid a whole lot when you're enlisted in the Air Force. So I worked at a local urgent care down in the Dayton area. My wife worked there full time, so I met my wife. Her whole family's from Dayton, Ohio. So we've been together 21 years, I think we're getting ready to celebrate, and dated a few years before that, and now I have 3 kids. So for the past 30 years, been living in Dayton, Ohio. Love it, wouldn't trade it for the world. Some people think when I work in the movie space that I'm an LA guy. We never once had a thought to move to LA. We are definitely a Dayton, Ohio family, so you don't have to worry about that. So after the Air Force, I worked in finance I have a finance degree from Wright State, so I worked in finance for a couple of years, had my own practice. But a good friend of mine, actually, he was my youth pastor when I was growing up at the orphanage. He had a heart for Hollywood. He had a heart to go to that evil place that no one at our church said he should ever go to, was to go to Hollywood. So he was out there for almost 20 years working for Warner Brothers. And we would be on the phone, this is probably 10, 12 years ago, and he would just complain about the types of stories that he was turning down and the types of messaging, what we see today, right? It was really starting to explode 10, 12 years ago. And he was just frustrated. He went there to tell just our types of stories, just good inspirational stories. So Daryl and I were on the phone one time, and I said, well, let's just go make our own movie. And he said, well, the studios, they have all the control with the money, distribution. So it took a year or so to figure out how I could help bring the financing from investors, and we could find the right story. And we did a movie called Woodlawn, and we got John Voight to be a part of it, which was a great patriot, and Sean Astin, who's probably more famous for Rudy. So he got to be a part of it. So we did that movie first, and really learned the impact that storytelling can have. This is nothing new. Christ has been using it for a couple thousand years. Like the idea of using story to get our message across really resonated with me because I often get the chance to do this and speak. And in today's world, there's not many kids who grew up in America in an orphanage, right? So it kind of gives me a platform to be able to share. The second movie we did was called I Can Only Imagine with Dennis Quaid, who is an even nicer guy than he is a good-looking guy. So, and it was a great experience working with him. And actually, that movie, that story, really had a big impact on his life. So it was great to be a part of that. It was so funny. My poor wife. So we did this great family movie that God really blessed that movie and that song. And when I would be speaking after that movie was already successful, everyone likes to say, what are you doing next? What's the next story? And I kind of go through the list of fun movies that had a chance of doing great. And at the end, I would say we also have Abby Johnson's story. It's a pro-life story. Hopefully we'll get to that one day. In my mind, I'm thinking, there's no way you can make a movie about abortion and get someone to go to dinner on a Friday night and then go to the movie theater and actually watch it. So I was never really too concerned that we'd have to make that movie. But God has a way of letting us know what his plan is versus our own plan. And every single time I would share that, somebody would come up afterwards. It got to the point where I knew what they were going to say. They would say, when you get to that pro-life story, let me know. We would want to be a part of that. And whether that means financially or support it, get a team together to go watch it. I kept hearing that over and over again. So I had the privilege of going home to tell my wife one night and saying, I really think we're doing the abortion movie next. And she just couldn't believe that we're going from super family friendly to somewhat controversial abortion movie. But God allowed us to make that movie. Lots of headwinds that were against us, but miracles that occurred to allow that story to be told. And then for me, I do all the marketing for our projects. And again, I live in Dayton, Ohio. I don't get these kind of phone calls, but I started getting phone calls from folks like Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley, James Langford, Chris Rice, just a lot of folks in D.C. that are household names for us. And they were asking me to come to D.C. to speak at different events, either Heritage Foundation or at the Capitol. Senator Ted Cruz put on a screening of the movie. He's a big movie buff, I found out. So I got to watch Unplanned with Senator Ted Cruz and about 20 other folks from the Senate. So just really surreal opportunities for me. One Friday, I was getting ready to fly back after speaking at the Capitol that morning. And I got a phone call from a lady who says she was Vice President Pence's assistant. and that him and his wife Karen were flying back to DC that next day, that Saturday evening, and they wanted to watch Unplanned on Sunday evening. If I could, give them a copy of it, and that he wanted to meet with me that Monday. So after I realized it wasn't a friend trying to play a joke on me, that it actually was her, it was pretty funny. In today's world, we used to actually have like DVDs of movies before it's released in the theater that we could hand out to people to kind of watch it. But that became too dangerous, right, with pirating and stuff. So all we can do now, it's like the Mission Impossible thing where you can send an email to somebody, have a link on it, and as soon as they press go, it blows up like 90 minutes later, whether they finish watching it or not. So I was explaining this to the lady, to his assistant. So she got him on the phone, which is pretty surreal, and was explaining that Joe can email you a copy of the movie, to which he said his White House email account doesn't allow links, which probably makes sense. So he's like, hold on a second, and he sent me his wife's Gmail account. So that, I literally was like, dear Karen, you have no idea how I am, and believe it or not, your husband asked me to send you this link to watch a movie. So that was pretty funny. But then the next morning, I've never been to the White House, and when you have an appointment with the vice president, they assume you've been to the White House. So I was at my hotel, and I literally put in my Uber account, White House, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and got dropped off at the gate. This tourist bus just dropped off about 60 Asian women. So at least I stood taller than most of them. But I was like, excuse me. And I got up to the gate where the security, I assume Secret Service guy was, and I said, I have an appointment, and they're like, sure you do. I'm like, who with? I'm like, it's Vice President Pence, and they're like, let me see your driver's license. So they came back 2 minutes later and say, okay, come with me. So at the White House, if you haven't been, at the fence level is where the security is. It's like 3 different stages you go through, and then you pop out. You're still at the gate level. They give you your badge and say, have a great meeting with the vice president, but you're still at the gate. Like, I'm looking at the White House. All I knew was, I assume his office is on the west wing, and I did the north, south, east, west. That one door over there must be the west wing. No one takes you. No one, they just assume you've been there, and I'm a guy, so I'm not going to ask. So I'm sure half the people in the room can relate to that. So I literally go to the door, and I very sheepishly opened the door, and I right away heard this, Mr. Knopp, it's good to see you. So that was cool. And so then his assistant came out and was talking with me. She had seen I Can Only Imagine. She liked the movie. And my goal as a film producer, we hadn't released it yet. I just wanted to get something to put on our social media team, a picture or something, so that Vice President Pence was behind it. So then he came out to the lobby to talk to me. In my mind, I'm like, I got 3 minutes to talk to this guy and try to figure out a picture. But he was great. We talked about Midwest values, right? He's an Indiana guy. I'm always careful talking about Pence these days. It used to be a lot cooler, like a year and a half ago or whatever. But I still, because I met the guy, I still, gladly talk about him in a great way. But the cool thing was, he said, Joe, have you ever been to the West Wing before? I'm like, no, actually, I've never been in the White House before. In fact, everyone assumed that I was, but I had no idea where I was going out there. And so he gave me a tour of the West Wing, which was with the vice president, which was very cool. And he was great. But he did talk about how the reason he got into politics 20 years prior to that was the life issue. And I think we did see that play out with President Trump and Vice President Pence in the White House. And it was really awesome to have them be the most pro-life administration this country has ever seen, including President Trump has been the only standing president to actually go to the March for Life in D.C. in the end of January. So it's very cool that we got to see that. So after, in my journey, so after we did that movie, that was in 2019, and we were all set to go to Ireland. My family was going to go with me. We were going to do a movie on St. Patrick. We haven't actually done this, so don't tell anybody. But we were going to do a movie on St. Patrick, which is an amazing story that most people don't know. They just think you drink green beer on March 17th, and that is St. Patrick's Day. But it's a beautiful story that the world needs to be familiar with. But in January of 2020, Ireland shut down before the U.S. even shut down because of what they call COVID, right? So instead, I was on the phone with Laura Trump. I got to spend time with her when I was marketing. It's pretty funny. Vice President Pence, when I met with him, he said, Joe, is there anything else I can do for you? I'm like, oh, it's not very often you have the vice president, asking me that. I'm saying, I would like to meet someone in your boss's family at some point in time to see if they would help promote the movie. So they introduced me to Laura Trump, Eric's wife. So, and she used to be a TV producer, so we had that connection, and we had a sincere relationship developed there. Our passion for our stories aren't being told enough, both on TV and the big screen. So I was on the phone with Laura after our movie and trip to Ireland got canceled, and something happened in the news that day. She was talking about, her father-in-law and women, and she just went on a rant about the amount of women that have worked for their company, Trump International, for decades. In fact, the leadership panel for Trump International has been women for a very long time. The White House was predominantly the offices were held by women. Kellyanne Conway was the very first, female campaign manager, and the campaign office was definitely, I spent a lot of time there, predominantly ran by women. So she was going over all this. I'm like, you should really we should tell this story. So I asked Laura if I could do a documentary. I had nothing else going on, but I was really intrigued by this story of all these women. So, they had agreed as a family to not let cameras into their houses, and I said, I don't want to do a formal sit-down type of documentary. So I asked if I could, shoot a documentary and be in their living rooms. They brought me to DC to meet with the rest of the family, and Laura went to bat for me, so I was able to do a documentary in 2020 with the Trump family. It's called The Trump I Know. We're actually re-releasing it here in a few weeks because big tech kind of got to us when we released it in 2020. But what it did was it gave me an opportunity to spend about 4 or 5 months with the Trump family, mostly with Eric and Laura. But I got to spend time with President Trump. I got to interview him in the residence of the White House, which was since I have time, I'll go ahead and share that story. But so it's funny. We were in DC. First of all, you can't just hop on his schedule. Evidently, he's got far more important people to talk to than me. But when his daughter-in-law and son is going to bat for us, they were trying to get us on his schedule. So we were in DC for about 6 weeks, and it's COVID, right? So it's kind of weird. So we're trying to get all the interviews with all these other women. We went to, I think, 8 different states. We were on the big pink Women for Trump bus, if anybody saw that. Yeah. I was the one guy besides Secret Service on that bus. We got to do that 8 different states. But then after about 6 weeks run, my crew was tired, and we didn't quite have the appointment yet with President Trump. So we flew them all home, which home for them is California, most of them. And sure enough, I was on the phone Monday morning after everybody getting home, Saturday sometime, with one of my guys who was helping me on the project. And Laura texted me and said, Joe, Wednesday morning at 11 o'clock, we need you to be at the White House with your crew. And I literally just dispersed them all back to California. So logistically, we had to bring everybody back in about a 24-hour time period. But the funny thing was, normally we had rental vehicles, but we gave them all back. But Secret Service, 48 hours before you bring a vehicle to the White House, I think I'm allowed to say this, for whoever's recording there, but they needed a VIN number of the vehicle. So I just gave them, I had a Honda Pilot Sport Utility at the time, I gave them my VIN number, and which meant, so then we all got to DC. Wednesday morning was the morning of the interview. I think the interview was at 11 o'clock. My day started at 4 in the morning at some base in DC where Secret Service goes through your vehicle if you're showing up at the White House that day, evidently. And when I say go through it, they left the nuts and bolts on the car, but I'm a film crew. I got cameras, I got microphone packs. They took everything apart. I would turn on everything, turn off everything. They swore our little microphone packs were detonators. I'm you can hit every button on there, nothing's going to detonate. And they don't joke real well either with Secret Service. And there's a big sign literally on the wall that says anything we deem it's unnecessary or something, we just destroy. You don't come back for after your appointment. It's just gone. So fortunately, they let us all keep everything. The really cool thing, I love this, and my boys this, I got a Secret Service escort to the White House, which is a 20-minute drive. So it's suburban, me and suburban going to the White House. They dropped me off there. And I got to park my black Honda Pilot under the carport of the White House for the day, and we just unloaded it into the White House, which is pretty cool. And So then that was back during COVID, so we do COVID testing and all of that. We got everything set up crew-wise, all of our lighting, cameras, everything's ready to roll. And the advance team within the White House, they basically came all morning. They were checking in on us, making sure we were ready. And they said, Joe, you're not going to believe this. This never happens, but he's like 15 minutes ahead of schedule. So you're going to have like an hour with him, which I just blew my mind. And then I get a text from Laura. And again, I live in Dayton, Ohio. Like I'm living like this surreal life. I get a text from Laura. And she's like, Joe, we're on the second floor having a meeting with like about a dozen women and the president. You should bring your camera up here and get some film footage of it. I'm texting her, I'm like, are you sure it's okay? She's like, yeah, don't worry about it. So I grab my camera guy and say, come with me. Laura invited us upstairs. So I didn't even know what stairs were. So we literally found the staircase. We went upstairs, and there was like one door that was like ajar, and there was a line of phones, like cell phones, on a table outside this door. So we knew that's probably where we had to go. So I very sheepishly opened the door, and I'm the camera guy going first, and things that you learn along the way. And President Trump was like literally like right there. It's the first time I pseudo met him, because we didn't officially meet there. And he just looked at the camera, smiled, and just kept on going like we belong there. So my camera guy. So when you see the documentary, you'll see this spin of President Trump with about 12 women, and it was like Ivanka and Kaylee and all kind of the usual suspects in the White House. So very surreal moment. So I'm like, all right, like God definitely has favor on this day. So I go back downstairs. The advance guy came back into the room and said, just so you know, the president has to cancel. Something came up. I'm like, really? So he's like, what you're going to see is, that elevator between you and the West Wing. The president will come down, and then he'll go to the West Wing. Something came up. So I'm standing out in the hallway, and he had that moment to look both ways, and he came in our direction. I think Laura must have already got to him and said, you're doing this interview. And he came to me, and because she said my name is Joe, he's like, all right, Joe, are we ready to do the interview? And I had to say, actually, sir, I'm still waiting on Laura, your daughter-in-law. She's not quite here yet. So he's like, well, thank God I finally have time to sit down and tie my shoe. So my actual first conversation with the president, he was sitting down tying his shoe. And we almost had it on camera, but his teams told my camera guy, you can't record the president tying his shoe. So which the president was like, that's what I want people to know about me. Like, I am literally that guy who ties his own shoe. But it was like this beautiful time with the president. And at the end of the interview, he said it was China, and he said it in that way that only he can say. So I made my ringtone for a while, because we got to record it ourselves. But my kids thought that was a good idea. But he was amazing. But one of the things that I learned of spending time with him, and I have witnessed with his family, is and I know this is not about getting Trump reelected, but I'll make part of it about that. He went to D.C. for the right reason. He was a business guy in New York City who one day at a meeting, getting the progress on some of his buildings that he was working on, and someone said, this one's on delay, we're waiting on drywall to show up from China. And he's like, what America do we live in where we're still waiting for drywall to come from China? And so that sparked him to, I'll call my politician friends, and surely they don't know this. They did. And he was just very frustrated that even the people that we elect for office were really not doing their job protecting our country. So I truly believe, I don't know if he would agree with this, but when he first threw his name out there, he just wanted to get the right people to finally step up and do what they were sent to D.C. to do, and it still didn't happen. So that's why he was the last one standing, and that's why I always describe the beer drinking America, the people who just understood why he was going there, elected him to be there. And I actually believe that the 4-year gap that we're probably going to see in between 45 and 47 was an opportunity for hopefully the rest of the country to see how bad the left's intentions are for this country. And I don't know if we would have saw that if he had 8 consecutive years. So we'll see, hoping, praying that still occurs. But with my journey, and then after that, I don't want to offend anybody in Ohio, but I started getting phone calls after doing this documentary. And the phone call would go like this: Joe, we know you're pro-life, it's a pro-life movie, and we know you're pro-Trump. that's the qualification for running for office in Ohio. To which I said, okay, I wish there was a little more qualification than that. But so for a few months, I actually traveled the state speaking at different events on behalf of my experiences with the two movies with some folks who wanted to run for statewide office in 22. Specifically governor, lieutenant governor. And I would hear stuff like, Joe, you pick one, we don't care which one, but your Trump connection, we can be the next, governor, lieutenant governor of Ohio. And it didn't take long to realize they were what I would call, unfortunately, like just traditional politicians who were looking out for themselves. They both had held office before, and I could tell this had nothing to do with the people of Ohio, it had to do with them. And I got to go home and tell my wife that my political career is done and it never got off the ground, and she was so thankful for that. Because I already dragged her through an abortion movie, didn't think it could get any more controversial, but a Trump documentary, which evidently is more controversial than abortion. So she was so excited that I said no. And then I got a phone call, I think the order is right, from Laura Trump, who their family's good friends with Jim Renacci. He was already running for governor. He needed, I say a sidekick, he needed a lieutenant governor. And so I spent some time with Jim, and he asked me to run with him for lieutenant governor back in 22. And it felt right from a God provision to take that opportunity. So I spent about 6-7 months every day doing exactly what I'm doing now, just sharing my story across the state of Ohio. And even though we didn't win, I know I was supposed to travel across Ohio and just encourage people with my story, because story can do that. A couple things I learned about the political space, and I have to be careful, I'm trying to not make eye contact with the actual elected officials in the room here. Except the sheriff, I always have great love and respect for a sheriff and prosecutor. I've learned, and judge, you know who you have to defend. But there's so many folks in this country that we live in today, in this time that we live in today, it's all about themselves. And the political space is full of that. In fact, you can go to high school now and college to become a politician. And growing up in Philadelphia and all the history that's there, that's not what our forefathers had intended. They intended for someone to come to you and say, you're a great business leader, you're a great community leader, you should run for office, instead of making it a career choice on your own. And I think we see the problems that resonate from that today when we look at Columbus and DC. Our responsibility with everybody in the room here today, when we elect someone, in a primary, we vote for them. In a general, we have to know who they are, and we have to truly try to understand where their heart is and why they're running. Because unfortunately, so many politicians today, they all think they're going to be president. They do. So they're building a resume when they're in office in preparation for their next election. They're not concerned about, Paulding County. They're not concerned about the finance. They're not concerned about everybody else in the room here. So our responsibility is to make sure we do elect the right people, and that we use our story and our platform to let our friends know, to let our neighbors know who these people are. I've traveled on the campaign trail for all of you that have statewide. This is what it looks like. This is demographics. I always say the 30 to 50-year-old families that are out with their kids right now doing different events, they need to be here. When we talk about the education system, it matters the most to them, but they are not here. So we have to figure out our own strategies to get to them. My life is dedicated to using story to get to them. I'm working on projects now. I always have to be careful what I say about what I'm working on, but I was in West Palm last week with some of the Trump family, and I am working on stories that can think generationally. How do we get our kids educated subliminally, through entertainment products, entertainment content that they want to watch, that has our message come through. It has the history of our country just baked into the midst of it, but they're not even going to understand that. They're just going to be watching an entertaining piece of content that they want to see. So we're working on that. People also always ask what my political aspirations are. My wife's not here, so I can answer that more honestly. I'm not sure. I know right now my passion and where I'm supposed to be is, getting our message out to this state, out to our local communities, and out to our country any way that I can be a part of it. Campaigning is hard. Campaigning is a lot of money. It's hard on the family, but I'll do whatever I need to do to continue to protect our children. And I actually might, run alongside Hayden. I think he's probably going to be our next. I love your boss, and he knows that, but you probably give him a run for the money here soon. But all that being said, I start out with saying everyone in here has a story. Please know your story. You're sitting in this room tonight, standing up for what we all believe in because of your journey. So just share it. It's hard to argue with a true story. Understand your platform. Everyone has an equal platform. So whatever your daily encounters are, use that platform to get our message across. Introduce people through your platform. All these pamphlets that we get to see at events like this, figure out a way to communicate to them who they should vote for and why. And whatever the issues are on the ballot, figure out a way to put it in their language, because there is confusion. We're voting yes in May for issue 1, we're voting no in November for. We have to help them understand what to do, because they're not here tonight and they won't be at the next one, I promise you. So I really appreciate you guys letting me speak tonight. Sorry if I went over, even though there wasn't a time limit on. I'll be here if anybody has any question or anything afterwards. But thanks for the opportunity to share my journey with you. Greatly appreciate all that you guys do. Thanks.
We're going to have Roy. Roy's going to come up and give us a short. About 10 minutes, Roy. And give us some information on what's happening with issue 1.
I got the 5 extra points.
I'm not even sure why she said short. Jason's after me. I'm surrounded by friends, but I also want to call out Jim Hoops again. Senator McCulley was sick, or he would have been here. I work with 2 of the finest folks, 2 people that always have my back, think like we do, and they tell the truth. It's a neat concept. We're used to it. It don't work out so well down there. But thanks, Jim. Thanks for being here. Give Jim a little. I'm going to take a little different angle on issue 1. Is there anyone in this room that when Roe v. Wade was turned over ever thought we would be in the position we're in today? We are in a position that none of us imagined, and we have a whole host of things that are working against us. The simplest one, and hopefully someday this will get corrected, there can be 3 issue 1s in 1 year. You can have an issue 1 in a primary. You can have an issue 1 in the August election. You can have issue 1 in the fall. People are confused. There are an incredible lot of people that still don't know what issue 1 is about this fall. And we're about to start voting. I want to talk about, and I'm not going to talk about the issue itself that much. We know what it is. It's to put in our Constitution the ability to have an abortion through birth. Regardless of what I believe or you believe, the only way we will win this is to convert the people that are going to vote no. My personal belief, life begins at conception. But if I go up to somebody that says abortion is a right, the heartbeat bill is too extreme, I will not win their vote. And folks, we need to win this, because this is my prediction. It took 50 years to overturn Roe v. Wade. Had nothing to do with abortion. It had to do with state rights. Bad law lasted 50 years, over a generation. This will last just as long if it passes. So how do we convert the no's? I'm not going to convert them by saying life begins at conception. We have to convert them, and this is what the polling shows. There are very few people, D's, R's, independents, moms, dads, grandmas, that believe in a 9-month, fully developed baby that is livable outside the womb to be killed at birth. We have to talk about the extremes that can happen if this goes on the Constitution. The way it is written, and the attorneys in here can straighten me out, if you read this, it reads very simple. It's done for a purpose. It's written very broad. The interpretation of it is very broad. It's not defined. As a non-lawyer, you know what I interpret that as? Anything goes. If we're going to win this, I say we have to put aside maybe our personal beliefs that are correct. That person that's in your family that says, well, 6 weeks heartbeat, Bill, you don't even know you're pregnant, that's too extreme. You'd like to rip their face off. You can't. You have to talk to them about, can you imagine a fully developed baby, 9 months old, being killed? We have to approach this different. We have to convert how they think, because I contend many of the folks that are voting are confused. They don't get it. It's another issue. They don't, whatever. What we need to talk about, and this is what the polling shows, and good knows I don't believe all polling, but the only way to convert them to saying, you know what, this is too extreme, let's live for another day. We need to defeat this. And we will not defeat it. And I'll talk to myself. If I get in somebody's face and say, life begins at conception, we will lose. Yeah. So I am asking you, talk to people that don't know how they're going to vote. Talk to them about the extreme possibilities coming out of this constitutional amendment. I'm not going to say a lot more about it. I think we're all in agreement in this room. There is a difference from a Paulding, Defiance, Van Wert, Putnam County Republican to a Franklin, Cuyahoga County Republican. If you have friends in cities, friends anywhere, you have to talk to them about the extreme possibilities of issue 1. Issue 2. I asked Jason to talk about issue 2 from the law enforcement side. But I want you to process, and he'll tell you that side of it. I want you to think about issue 2, which is the legalization of recreational marijuana. Who in here has a business? You don't have to hold your hand. Who in here buys something from a business? That's everybody. Who in here buys insurance? Everybody. The cost to business from legalization of marijuana is incredible, and here's why. It stays in your system 30 days. So any industrial accident, any trucking accident, any automobile accident where the person has used recreational marijuana, you can't prove when they used it. I don't think it will be defensible in court, or I think the attorneys, and straighten me out, but folks, how do you insure industrial liability if you can't prove the person is high? I guarantee you insurance companies are not going to lose money. They are going to raise rates. And it will affect every single one of us because we're consumers. I will let Jason talk to the legalization from the law enforcement side. But thank you. Thanks to everyone that's here tonight. I appreciate your support. I would say I'm having more fun than I can believe, but that's not the truth. But my good friend, Jason Landers, will you speak on that?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm going to talk to you for just, I could talk a lot about this. I understand I have a short amount of time. So when Roy told me, or asked me if I could speak for a couple minutes, a lot of times I say I could say hello for a couple minutes and just introduce myself. So I'll do the best I can to talk quickly just so we can move on through the agenda stuff. Listen, recreational marijuana is coming, right? I mean, we can see it in the forefront. Not only am I the sheriff here in Paulding, I am in the second vice president and the board of directors for the Buckeye State Sheriff's Association. So I'm in Columbus a lot to learn what's happening right out of the State House and try to keep a pulse on things that are moving. We have a very active lobbyist that's in the State House. It's delivering information to us. It has his finger on the pulse as well. It's coming. We know it's coming. Here's the deal. It doesn't need to be an amendment issue. It doesn't need to be a ballot issue. My opinion is, and I've shared this with Roy, we've talked a lot about this before Roy was in his position. If this is going to happen, it should be legislated. So there's some controls over what happens with it. And that's my belief. If it's going to be a ballot issue, now this isn't going to be a constitutional amendment as I understand it. So there will be some ability for the legislators to correct what is bad in this ballot issue if it passes. But we know how legislation works. It's a snail's pace. That's the process. It's not fast. We understand that. Those of us that pay attention to it understand that. Even though I'm not a legislator, but I pay a lot of attention to it in my role. So, marijuana, this is going to be a bad thing. But listen, there's bipartisan support for this. And one reason I believe that the wheels are turning in Columbus to legalize this stuff is the controls, if you will, the oversight of medicinal marijuana was under the Board of Pharmacy. They were law enforcement officers that controlled that issue, that policed those entities through the medicinal marijuana process, from the cultivators to the distributors, those types of things. That has transitioned to commerce. So what does that tell you? When it was under the Board of Pharmacy, where there's controls and the people responsible for holding them accountable were law enforcement officers, trained law enforcement officers, they ruffled too many feathers of the money behind marijuana. Those aren't typically Ohio people. This stuff is funded from folks from California and New York. If you look at the LLCs and the people responsible for marijuana distribution centers and cultivation centers, it's not Ohio money. Now, they might have an Ohio address today because for the past few years they might have moved, but the money coming from that are very wealthy folks that don't live here in Ohio. Our laws are being affected by the influence of cash coming from several states away. So now it's going to be moved under the control of the Department of Commerce. Well, what's that? That's funding cash, and there's bipartisan support through that. So listen, whether we agree with it or not, I can pound my fist and argue, and I've done all those things in our board meeting with my colleagues, but we got to understand we can either get on the train and figure out how to deal with it and try to write it so we can have some controls over this product that's coming our way in a recreational fashion, or we're going to have to deal with what we're handed. So Roy asked me to talk about the enforcement side. So I'll share with you this. In 2015, I was one of 30 sheriffs in the country that was selected to go to Denver, Colorado, to the National Sheriff's Institute to have some executive level training and help myself to come back here and hopefully be a better sheriff for my office and my deputies and for you folks. And what we learned out there, it was not long after recreational marijuana was legalized in Colorado. And so we got to spend a lot of time with the law enforcement out there. And so the questions were, what are you seeing? What's happening? Well, here's what they were seeing. Number one, their driving related offenses and crashes were skyrocketing involved with cannabis. Well, what happens? Today when we have, let's just say we have an alcohol related crash. We have roadside testing, field sobriety test, things to articulate our impairment, and then we have machines that we can operate in a fairly reasonable amount of time to give us some evidence to your impairment. With marijuana, we don't have that business. So what we have today in our language is called a DRE, a drug recognition expert. And those patrol officers that are DREs, drug recognition experts, are the people that handle these roadside tests to determine your level of impairment and what type of a substance you might be impaired by. You can be removed from the scene and brought to an off-site location for those testing. It's a very long, drawn-out process. If you've ever seen it or hopefully not experienced it, it's a long process. You have to darn near be a doctor to pass the testing, to get the credentials to be a DRE. Now, I love my deputies. They are very special to me. They do a very, very good job serving you folks. But I'm not sure I have very many, if any, that are going to go through the testing and can pass the testing. And I'm not discrediting my deputies at all to become a DRE, to be able to deal with people driving under the potential influence of cannabis. Now there's other things. There's blood testing, there's urine testing, and there's things that can be done to give the prosecutors some evidence to support driving under the influence. The second thing and the most disturbing thing to me, and I've told this story a lot, and I think this is what Roy really wanted me to share with you. The captain that I was with from the Aurora County Sheriff's Office, he and I were in a conversation one-on-one, and he says, here's our biggest issue. You wouldn't believe it. The drug cartel bought up every open storefront in Denver. He said, Sheriff, you won't find an empty store in our city. They are all bought up immediately when this passed by the drug cartel. You can walk in there and people do everyday businessmen, whoever. There's no real demographic that this affects. Everyone walks in the door and you have a coupon. Heck, I had coupons at my hotel bar for a $12 joint. So he says you go into the marijuana store with your coupon, you buy a high-powered $12 joint. Now, when I talk about, when I was born in the 70s, I talk about the 70s, I talk about ditchweed and that type of marijuana that people might ingest. That's one thing. That's what a lot of people think marijuana is. Today, folks, it is not. It's 80% THC. There's some they want to make it 90% THC. So this is not ditchweed. This is manufactured, high-powered, potent marijuana that they want to sell to you in a $12 joint. So he says, here's what happened. We started to have mom and pop shops popping up in grandma's basement on this nice little side street in our village, and the kids are selling $2 joints out of the window. So it just there's your legal operation. So you can go, and some people might just go right into the business, buy their marijuana however they want, pick your flavor, pick your potency, pick your product, and leave. But if I don't want to pay $12 for some cannabis, I just go down Woodring Street to grandma's house and buy it from Johnny for $2. So that illegal operation still happens. We still have that stuff to deal with. And he said it's really disturbing to see that process, what we've seen through the legalization of marijuana. You walk in a store and buy it, and now we see the drug trafficking happening in residents in neighborhoods that you would never expect because they're undercutting the legal business uptown on their street. I don't want to see that happen to us. We have our hands full here in Paulding County. We're a pretty rural county, as you know, by population. If you read our newspapers, we have our hands full dealing with this meth problem that we deal with right now. We had some crack cocaine recently that we haven't seen in a long, long time. So people say, you have a really bad drug problem. Well, drugs change. Those things change. Right now we're dealing with crystal meth. It's all coming from Mexico. It's coming right from the cartel, comes right up through Indianapolis to Fort Wayne, across to Toledo and up to Detroit. We're a part of a multi-area narcotics task force, and I have a full-time deputy assigned to that. He works that thing more than 40 hours a week as needed on his time off, and we partner with 10 other agencies and some state and federal agencies to try to combat and stay ahead of what we're dealing with today. So if we have to deal with legalized marijuana, that's going to be a completely different complex issue from an enforcement standpoint. What's more concerning to me from a manpower deal is what's going to happen in the black market on the side streets that we don't have today. So I appreciate your time. I could talk about this for a long time, and I'll be here if you have any comments after that. But I really hope that this is a no issue in November. Again, talking with Roy, we talk quite a bit. We have a fantastic relationship. I think this should be a legislative issue that our legislative folks should really take. They know what's going on in Columbus. They know this train's coming at us, and write the rules to try to have some controls over this thing if it's gonna happen. So thank you very much for your time. Hopefully I didn't talk to you.